We're live.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back or welcome to the Mahone Bay Town Council meeting for the 24th of March. And we'll begin by acknowledging that we are gathered today in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Today, we gather with the intent followed by the living peace and friendship treaties with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. We'll call the meeting to order. Council, you have an agenda that was emailed out to you in anticipation of this meeting. What is your wish for the agenda? Councillor Carver?
Your worship, I would move that we accept the agenda as circulated with one addition.
And that addition is?
It would be a notice of motion from myself.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Bird seconds. You've heard the motion to accept the agenda as presented with the addition of a notice of motion. All in favor of the motion indicate, please. Motion's carried. We have a good agenda. Let's go to item number 2.1, the special meeting of March the 2nd. Entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented or as you would amend them. Councillor now moves to accept as presented. Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wilson, you've heard the motion on the question. All in favor? That motion is carried. And now item 2.2, the regular meeting of March 8th. Councillor Carver?
Yes, I move that the minutes for the meeting of March 8th be accepted as circulated.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Now moved and seconded to accept the minutes as circulated on the question. All in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you. We have a presentation tonight. We have David Murdoch and Staff Sergeant Vic Whalen, who are going to speak to us about the Senior Safety Advisory Partnership. Gentlemen, please.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Good evening. Dear Mayor and members of the Town of Mahone Bay Council, thank you for having us here today. My name is David Murdoch. I'm chair of the Lunenburg County Senior Safety Partnership Society, and RCMP Staff Sergeant Vic Whalen, District Commander for Lunenburg County. And he's also the RCMP representative on our board and a strong supporter of the Senior Safety Program of Lunenburg County. We appreciate this opportunity to speak to you about our program's need for increased funding. Our coordinator, Chris Acomb, is unfortunately absent today, but has presented our service to you last year. We are here today to press for a contribution from this municipality of $952. We've sent a formal letter and we wanted to give you the opportunity to ask questions. However, before we take questions, we have a short presentation. Recent monthly reports and the 2021 annual report show an increase in the need for the services that the program provides. When the coordinator, who is entitled to vacation, family, and sick time, is absent, there is currently no other full-time or part-time staff member to continue with the service for our seniors, as is the case at this time. Since February the 24th, no new clients have been able to access services offered by the program as we currently have only one staff member. The part-time position ended December 2021 due to a lack of funds to support both positions, full-time and part-time, to the end of fiscal 2021-22, so the end of this month. We expect that our full-time coordinator will be returning to work on April 21st. Our seniors greatly deserve the service this program offers, and they need your financial support. I am sure many of you have, on behalf of someone, accessed our services or know someone who has benefited from the services we provide. So this slide shows that there's an increase in demand for our service, and some of the reasons, first and foremost, COVID, and the issues related to COVID. Home visits, where public health is allowed, have increased. I'm sure you're all familiar with the subject of fraud, and we're talking about phone fraud, internet fraud, and also I hear now that people are actually coming to the front door and trying things on there. Abuse, and this runs the gamut from financial abuse, physical abuse, and mental abuse. And also not listed are a significant housing shortage. And many interventions have multiple associated events. For example, COVID has forced people to be confined. And if you throw in housing shortage, then people are having to crowd together, let's say, and then throw in the mix mental health issues and abuse, and you have an ugly situation. Next slide, please. So we need increased funding, and primarily it's to support the increased demand that I've just illustrated. But it's also to provide stability for our HR, for our staff, and give them some assurance that we won't be laying them off, as we unfortunately had to do in December with a part-time person. We need to retain staff. We need to have at least 2 trained staff. And when we lose a part-time person who's very well trained, we aren't assured that they're going to be there when we have the funds to rehire them. They may well have moved on. And so retaining staff is important to us, and providing that stability, because they become trained, they become familiar with the work, and bringing in a new person is a bit of it's onerous on our coordinator, full-time coordinator. It takes away from her valuable work with vulnerable seniors. Increased funding would also reduce burnout. And this is also related to having someone who can give the coordinator a break. And our coordinator is very reluctant to take time off. But if there is a part-time person to fill in, then our full-time coordinator will be much more accepting of taking time off. And also, the last point on this slide is that our coordinators are a lot more cost effective in dealing with issues when they're called out than would be a member of the RCMP. And I'll let Vic talk to this point a bit more broadly.
Thank you, and hopefully you can all hear me okay. I'm going to spare you the video so don't make us all dizzy. But thank you, David. I mean, in speaking with the issues with seniors in the community, we all know it's an aging population, it's a growing population, and there's a continued demand for policing resources, whether it be mental health, substance abuse, seniors, things like that are ever increasing in the area. And a lot of times we probably know people, I know myself, I mentioned earlier today, I got a call from CBSA that I had a warrant for my arrest. So I find it comical. Unfortunately, a lot of seniors are quite vulnerable. And this is the type of thing that senior safety program can help with. And with COVID, hopefully in the rearview mirror, we can move forward and do more educational programming through the seniors coordinator, which will help hopefully educate the seniors and the less fortunate. And like David said, it's much more cost effective. A lot of times when we're dealing with a senior in crisis, we can call on Chris and her team to help us out. And it's an extremely valuable resource. And I certainly hope that Mahone Bay is willing to assist Dave in his request. Thank you.
Next slide, please. So this slide illustrates our current budget. That is the fiscal year that ends this month, 31st of March. So we received $25,000 from the province. We received a total of just over $27,000 from the councils combined, and $5,000 from the United Way. So the next line basically says, if this budget was carried into the next fiscal year, and I can assure you it won't be, but if it was, we would even have to reduce our coordinators' hours to work within our finances. However, the proposed budget, I'm happy to announce that the province has contributed an additional $25,000 to our fiscal 22-23 fiscal year budget. So that's 100% increase. And we're asking for a 75% increase from councils, which will bring the total contribution they would make to $47,500. And the United Way has offered to increase its budget by 75%, provided all the councils also increase their budgets by 75%. And we are very grateful to the United Way for their support over the years, as we are to all councils. Now, I should point out that most of this budget goes towards wages. Only 9,000 of it, 9,000 goes to expenses. And the reason that number is so low is that the town of Bridgewater provides a number of in-kind contributions. They provide a vehicle for our coordinators to use. They provide clothing, office space. They are supervised by the chief of police in Bridgewater. The town of Bridgewater provides accounting services, a computer, of course, and the access to the internet, and of course, employment management, payroll, HR, etc. So there's a lot more going on in terms of that 9,000 than meets the eye at first. Next slide, please. So essentially, we're saying let's all chip in and do this together. And I just want to finish up by reading a quote from the mayor of the town of Bridgewater, David Mitchell. And he said this at a town council meeting on the 24th of last month. And he said, "I know I sound like a broken record when I keep saying that this is an incredibly valuable program, and I don't know how they do it with the resources they have. I would encourage the community to educate themselves on what these individuals do, because they're doing a lot of heavy lifting. So we appreciate all of the help, financial help that the councils provide to us. And we're asking them to step up and increase that funding so that we can do a better job of supporting vulnerable seniors in the community. And I'll finish there. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Staff Sergeant Whalen as well. Councils, comments, questions? Councillor Wilson.
I'm just wondering, Your Worship, is there any time sensitivity to this money?
Mr. Murdoch?
Well, at this point in time, I would say we don't have a cash flow problem, but we are reluctant to live. We need to live within our means. And I guess what we're thinking of is that if these contributions from councils aren't forthcoming immediately, that we will, and I expect that's the case, then we will hire a part-time person and to support our coordinator. And we will monitor our finances. And if at the end of the fiscal, we're running short, as we did last year, then we would unfortunately have to let them go. But certainly what we've done is calculated what kind of part-time hours we can afford if all the councils contribute the increase. And that's about 7 shifts every 2 weeks. If we receive no increase from any of the councils, then we're down to 2.4 shifts every 2 weeks. And so that's the range of what we're going to offer a part-time person. But of course, we're not going to find anybody that's going to work for 2 shifts every 2 weeks. It's not a living wage. So we're hoping that that with your support and the support of other councils, we'll have enough to offer a reasonable number of shifts, and we can do that right away. We can do that in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Kangata.
So, I'm in support of the program, and I think we probably need to support them going forward. But I'm just curious about with the doubling of funding from the province and the increase from the municipalities that you're requesting for, does that mean that you will have 2 full-time staff or just 1 full-time and 1 part-time?
We would have 1 full-time and 1 part-time.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Murdoch, I look at the numbers and we're talking about increasing council contributions by about 90%. Is that a good rough figure to consider? Whatever Mahone Bay contributed in the current year, increase it by 90%?
No, sir. It's actually a 75% increase. So
Okay.
last year, the town of Mahone Bay contributed, as far as I know, $544. And we're asking for an increase of 75%, which is $408, which would be a total of $952.
$952.
That's right.
Councillor Wilson.
Is it appropriate to make a motion at this time?
CAO.
Our policy actually prohibits making a motion on a delegation. You can do a notice of motion at the end of the meeting, Kelly.
Okay.
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 All right. Anyone else? Councillor Carver.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to make a comment about the nature of this service and building on what Staff Sergeant Whalen was saying earlier about the value of having a non-police service respond to mental health issues, but and that the range of issues that implies. And to tie that in with the conversations that are prevalent in many cities, sometimes called defunding police, but reframing that as building services that augment police services. And so I think that this program is really an excellent example of how that kind of service can work.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Carver. Councillor Burdick.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you for your presentation. I've been paying attention to the various reports that have been coming back on I think a bi-monthly or every 3 months or so. And it is alarming sometimes to see the numbers there. And it's a particularly vulnerable population. So I want to say that I will be throwing my support behind a possible motion as well. So, but thank you for the information that you both shared.
Okay. Anyone else have a comment? Okay. Mr. Murdoch, Staff Sergeant Whalen, thank you for bringing this issue to our table tonight. As Councillor Wilson has suggested, he is going to do a notice of motion at the end of this meeting. And frankly, I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit that all we're contributing to this program with an increase is $952. It would seem to be one of the best bargains that this council can get in terms of helping our citizens, particularly the senior citizens who are often in such dire straits. So thank you for coming to speak with us, and thank you for this information. And I'm sure staff will be advising you of any outcomes on this particular item.
Well, thank you very much for having us.
Thanks for the opportunity, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Good evening.
Okay. Let's go to correspondence action items. We have 3 items. One is a letter from Nick Pavlinik, recurring graffiti concerns. Clerk, did you want to? I notice we've got the video surveillance policy on the agenda down in staff reports, but did you want to talk about this particular item?
I have nothing further to add to this, Your Worship. I'm not sure if the CAO has anything to say. I think this is the author has expressed themselves well. I have nothing further to add.
Okay.
I can just briefly say, Public Works is always working to stay on top of the graffiti in the community, but I think any further discussion could be relative to the staff report on surveillance. I think what we are doing, we certainly, what we can do, we certainly are doing within our capacity, and we've been coordinating with the RCMP as well.
Is it Councillor Carver?
Oh, yes, I was.
And Deputy Mayor.
Yes, I was in fact going to make a motion that the staff reply to the letter with the information that the video surveillance will be implemented, and to thank him for his concern and action and for acting on his concern.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, so I guess similar to what Councillor Carver said, I think the other piece for me is that he's raised, from my perspective, two more interesting ideas around addressing graffiti that will not necessarily be covered by surveillance, and that's, I think, rewards or increased penalties, and sort of wondering, because we'll be discussing the surveillance piece later, where do those two, where do we park those two, and or not even park, when can we have that conversation, or is it okay to introduce that within the surveillance motion, staff report?
CAO.
It's probably more appropriate to discuss those parts on this correspondence. So right now.
I guess, thank you for that. May I let you decide who goes next. Sorry about that.
Clerk?
Wanted to know if we had a seconder for Councillor Carver's motion. Deputy Mayor, were you seconding or just asking a question?
Second, and then ask a question if possible.
Thank you.
Good one. Thank you. Okay, Councillor, I'm sorry, CAO.
Just with respect to the motion that's now on the floor, Councillor Carver, if I understood correctly, you were referencing a decision on something later on the agenda in this motion. So my thought would be that this motion should be deferred until after we have a resolution with respect to that policy, just not to prejudge.
What the hell? That's
Thank you for that. I'm happy to do so, to defer it till later. Yeah.
Deputy Mayor, seconder, you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I had one question about the graffiti piece. It's almost like a trademark, is it not? The mark that a particular tagger makes. There's a lot of similarities in the ones that Mr. Pavlinik sent in the photographs. So one of the advantages possibly of the video surveillance would be to, if you're identifying the individual who's got that tag ID, you'll have to develop a new one, I guess, because you'll have them every time that, or her, every time that you see that tag. Okay, so we'll defer that to later. Item 4.2, First Responders Wellness Symposium. Deputy Mayor?
Mr. Mayor, I still want to go back to my question on the previous item, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
Yes, we as the CAO pointed out, the two other elements of that letter, I guess suggestions of rewards and increased penalties we will not be able to cover them in the surveillance piece. And I was wondering, is council open to doing that, engaging with the community to I guess put out some rewards, or in many ways find ways to work with the community so that they can identify, the community can help in the identification in a much more robust way than just saying, well, if you see somebody, call us. Incentivizing that, I think there might be some rewards in there, and then increased penalties. I don't know how that would work, but I would be supportive of us doing that, because I think those measures as a bulk might probably get us more bang for our buck than just one piece.
Are these bylaw issues or criminal code issues? CAO?
At the current time, to my knowledge, we don't have any specific penalties in our bylaws having to do with vandalism. And, jurisdictionally, vandalism of our property versus vandalism at large would obviously be something we'd have to consider if we were to develop something like that. Although much of this vandalism has taken place on town infrastructure, not all.
Okay. Councillor Burdick. Thank you, Deputy Mayor and CAO. Councillor Burdick.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is maybe worth a larger discussion if these other aspects are coming up. I know in certain larger communities that I've lived in, sometimes different solutions or mitigations, I would say, of graffiti have happened, i.e. mural making, engaging the community in different ways like that. So there might be more of a discussion here. And I am not going to assume anything about who is doing it, but I also know that, you know, it might be an aspect of serving the younger community a little bit better in terms of activities and available recreational facilities and that sort of thing. Those things sometimes go, they're not unrelated sometimes. Not that these would necessarily remove these things from happening, but it does seem like there'd be a few things that we could discuss around this. So I don't know if that would mean a special meeting or a policy and strategy, not the meeting that we have the last Monday of the month, which I
Yeah.
can never remember the name of, but it's about
Policy and strategy.
thank you. Okay, good. I was on the right track, but that sort of thing, because it's sort of, yeah, as the deputy mayor is suggesting, a single approach to these things is not, it can help, but it might not, it might just be a sort of repeating situation.
Councillor Carver.
Thanks. I support the idea of having a broader, more inclusive variety of approaches to this issue. And one issue that I think would be valuable to pursue some more is to remind the public or encourage the public to use the report function on the website, or simply even not even using that, but to be proactive in sending in information about things that they see, whether or not it's graffiti or vandalism, but any other problem that they see around town, just to bring it to our attention or staff's attention, things that need. I mean, I do that as a citizen when I'm out and about. I take pictures of graffiti, or I take pictures of situations that I think are a concern and send them in as a citizen, not necessarily as Councillor Carver. But I don't know how many other people do that. And I agree that I think that we could take this to a policy and strategy committee for a more fulsome discussion.
Okay. That would be an option, Deputy Mayor. You could make a motion now to take it to policy and strategy, or wait till the video surveillance, if you see any relief that way. Yep, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, so I'll wait until we have this surveillance conversation and then see what's the best approach to go, because I think there will be some impacts to having this larger conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Carver. Let's go to the next item. Chris Pelham, Senior Wheels Association. Request for it's a letter of support. Councillor Now and then Councillor Carver.
I think you missed 4.2 there, Mr. Mayor.
The First Responders Wellness Symposium. That's an important one. Please, let's go back to 4.2. And I've got the letter right in front of me. Various levels of sponsorship. 100 to 249, 250 to 499. Councillor Carver, do you have an observation or a comment?
Yes, I was actually, I think that I would like to see us contribute to that. And I just thought that a silver donation of $250 might be appropriate. And I'm prepared to make a motion to that effect, but I see that Councillor Burdick wants to comment too, so I'll just defer until she's made her comment.
Thank you. Councillor Burdick?
Thank you. I found this to be an interesting letter, and I, in theory, support it. But I did also notice, and I don't know if it might have been something that was just happening on my computer, but when I tried to look up the website, it was there was nothing there. So I would just like a little bit more information about the organization that we are contributing money to. Yeah, So if that could happen, I think that maybe it might be worth deferring the discussion until we actually have more background information. Did other people notice that with the website? Yeah.
September 24th is when it's going to take place. So it's perhaps we could ask staff to investigate and bring us back the good news at the first meeting in April on the particular organization or their goals, or
Does somebody want to make a motion to defer this to the next meeting, and then staff will see if we can find anything else out?
okay. Counselor
I'll-
Burdick,
Yeah. I'll make that.
you'll make the motion. Counselor now is going to second it. I guess that's what that means. Are you doing your best Winston Churchill imitation? Okay. It's been moved and seconded that we will defer this item until the next meeting, which will give staff an opportunity to develop a profile on the organization. You've heard the motion, Councillor Wilson?
Your worship, I just have a process question. It was clear to me during this last debate that we could have made a motion to give these folks money had we so chosen, but we chose not to. And I'm wondering why we can make a motion to give money on the basis of a letter we've all just seen, but our policy prohibits doing the same thing when we get a presentation.
And I think that's the key. I'll leave it to the CAO to elaborate, if you would, please.
Well, like you were saying, Mr. Mayor, it is specific to the presentation section of our policy, and the rationale had to do with being asked for money on the spot and having an opportunity for all the members to contemplate that, because the requests in the package are provided when the package is put out, whereas a request being delivered by a delegation or presentation, sorry, old terminology, would be something that could be delivered on the spot, would be new to the council members, and they would feel put on the spot about voting on that matter. So it can be changed if the policy were changed, but the rationale was to allow till the following meeting for council members to contemplate the request.
Okay. Thank you, CAO. So, yes, we have the motion. It was moved and seconded. I think we were voting on it when Councillor Wilson raised the question. So on the motion, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to correspondence for information items. There are 5. Deputy Mayor.
We haven't dealt with 4.3.
Oh my God. Oh no, the seniors' wheels. Yep, okay. You're quite right, sir. My continuing error. Back to the seniors' wheels. What is your wish, council? CAO?
I just wanted to make a quick note here from our accessibility coordinator. She did want me to mention this, just that this was actually referred to us through Ellen, our shared accessibility coordinator for the county, who wanted to indicate that it would be something that would be, I think, very in keeping with our commitments under the Accessibility Act and our Lunenburg County Accessibility Plan. So she was encouraging all the councils, everybody's receiving the similar request, would be supportive of this. So I just wanted to note that.
Okay. Councillor Carver.
Yes, I'm willing to make a motion in support of providing a letter of support for the Senior Wheels Association application to the Rural Transit Solutions Fund.
Okay. So, yeah, they're basically talking about the rest of Lunenburg County pretty well, except for, yeah, the rest of Lunenburg County. Councillor Burdick? You seconding?
Yes. Yeah, I'm seconding that motion.
There you go.
Thank you.
Okay. You heard the motion that we will offer a letter of support and encouragement to the Third Sector Enhancement Limited proposal to expand the accessibility-based transportation system that currently operates in Bridgewater to all of Lunenburg County. You've heard the motion. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Now, Counselor, now, if I can get my other screen to work. I think that's the end of 4.3, Counselor, now, is it not? Thank you. Then let's go to our correspondence for information items, item 5. What is your wish? Counselor Now?
I would move that we receive and file the correspondence 5.1 to 5.5.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Deputy Mayor seconds. Is there anything in 5.1 to 5.5 that you'd like to expand on? Councillor Burdick, Councillor Carver, and Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, for 5.2, I think that was what we expected a little bit as a response from the minister about the lowered speed limits. But I would make a motion that we do forward. I don't know if a motion is required, but to forward to Mr. Croft from the Provincial Traffic Authority for consideration of a lowered speed limit inside the town.
Okay, do we have a seconder for Councillor Burdick's motion? Councillor Carver seconds it. On the question, CAO. Our traffic authority.
Yeah, possibly as a clarification, the letter to the minister was for the province's support to lower speed limits, but it didn't specify which speed limits within town we would lower. So essentially what they're saying is here we can make a request for lowering a speed limit, but we would need to specify, are we talking about all of the speed limits within the town or a specific street or a section of a street? So that'd still need to be determined. I guess, as you said, this motion, it could be all speed limits in town, but I don't know that that would be what council was intending. I don't know that we've talked about it quite that broadly.
Okay, Councillor Carver.
Yes, I have a question about the bureaucratic process here. I was just interested in the fact that the letter had gone to the minister and then it was tossed back with the instruction or the advice to then go to the civil servant. So, I mean, could we have started with the civil servant route without going to the minister in the first place?
Well, there's two different, oh, sorry, Mr. Mayor, can I?
Yes, please.
There's two different things being referenced here. So in the second case, with respect to the roads outside of the town limits, we have gone that route, and I'll have to check with Jonathan to confirm, but I believe the person we've spoken with now on a couple of occasions is the person that is being referenced there. Now, the minister seems to have misunderstood the request in that respect, but I do believe that the local authority has understood what our request was with respect to lowering the speed limit on the approach to town, on the approaches to town on Main Street and Edgewater. So we did start there, then we went to the minister, and now we're back to that same level. So I don't have a lot of optimism for that, although the misstatement of the request might be part of that. I think we did request what we were meaning to, which was lowering from 80 to 50 and 70 to 50 a bit further out from the town limit as opposed to right at the town limit. I think we might want to try again, and I mentioned this at the time, with respect to Edgewater, even to an extent Main Street, when the town has done the improvement of pedestrian crossings at both locations. So if we wanted to go to the local authority with some photographic evidence of the new crossing going in at Keddy's and indicate the distance from the effective 50 zone to the crossing, which, according to Transportation Association of Canada guidelines, if you're going at 80, 1 foot before where the 50 zone begins, you would not be able to stop in time for the crossing. So I think the province would acknowledge that there will be a significant rationale there, even if they hadn't acknowledged it previous. We did talk about that at the time because they could say, what have we done to improve the safety on this end?
Mm.
But the location of that crossing would provoke a potentially different response. As far as the limit in town, we hadn't gone the bureaucratic route, and my apologies as traffic authority. I was not under the understanding that there was a defined procedure for that. So I'm happy to reach out to the provincial traffic authority and get from him what exactly he would need, since it says that we would need to support the request. But I'll probably be best served to do that with respect to a clarification from council on which area or areas we're talking about. And like I said, we'll come back to what we've done. So if we wanted to request a reduction in speed limit to 30 on Kinburn and Claremont, we could actually demonstrate that we have installed speed humps in an effort to reduce the speed, and that the speed limit reduction is deemed to be complementary. Whereas in other areas, they might look at the infrastructure and argue that the infrastructure generally supports an understanding of a higher speed limit. And Fairmont that we talked about at the recent policy, or Faubourg that we talked about at the recent policy and strategy, might be an example of that, where it has all the characteristics of a rural road.
Deputy Mayor, are you commenting on the same? Yeah.
Yeah. This, I guess I'm a bit concerned about the kicking back or throwing back the question back to, I guess, a bureaucrat by the minister. But that's, I guess, something that we can try and find a way to explore with the minister directly at some point. But I think that the clarification that I think we probably need to have within town, especially if we're talking about speed limits within town, is what exactly are we looking for? And I would like to throw out the idea that maybe we seek to lower speed limits to 40 all across town rather than 50. And so that it's not one street has 30 and another street has 50, but we lower to 40. 30 seems to be, people seem to not want 30. Maybe now lowering it to 40. We know that just by lowering it a little bit, people might still go above that, but they won't go too far above that. So I would suggest to us as council to maybe agree upon a limit that we were requesting for, and the traffic authority and the CAO can pursue that with the local folks and see where that gets us, so that we have clarity within town. And then, as the CEO proposed, the approaches to town, maybe those what do you call them? Crossings will help, but I think maybe we might want to ask for a direct meeting with the minister so that she can fully understand, rather than just a letter. She can fully understand this is something that we really want. It has been, I think, since we came to council, there has been that notion. It has been on staff report that the vast, but we're not getting anywhere with it. Just maybe having a meeting with her about that particular issue might move us a little bit further and get this resolved before the next election, so hopefully.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Carver.
I understand that there's an unseconded motion on the floor, which I'm willing to second Councillor Burdick's motion, and would also like to say that I agree with the 40
kilometer
limit throughout town, just for the record.
CAO.
But before we get to the moving and seconding of the motion by Councillor Burdick and Councillor Carver, we should vote on the motion to receive and file that was previously on the floor. So I'm going to have a quick call the question on that one and then move on to the next one if you're willing.
Okay, I was treating these issues as part and parcel of the question on the motion to receive and file. Before
well, it's fine to have some discussion. We just can't have another motion within the motion. Yeah.
Okay, that's right. You have to deal with the first motion first. So we have a motion to receive and file. We are discussing the content of some of those items, but on the motion to receive and file, all in favor? Motion's approved. Thank you. And we are now back to discussing on the question that would have been around for that first motion on the individual items. So CAO, what is your current position on with respect to Councillor Burdick's motion.
So Councillor Burdick, do you want to clarify if, I think when Penny seconded your motion, it was to have speed limits reduced to 40, but you hadn't actually, I think, included that in the original motion. So is that a friendly amendment? Are we now talking about a reduction to 40? Okay.
I would agree with that, yeah, and with the town-wide one for just ease of understanding.
So on my end, if the motion were to pass, then, you know, the first step would be to reach out to the Provincial Traffic Authority as indicated and ask what would be necessary, if anything, to support a request to reduce the town's speed limits to 40. And then I can come back and report to council in that regard. So either I'm going ahead and submitting that request as a letter, or there's additional work that we would need to do that we could then contemplate.
Okay. Councillor Burdick, you're comfortable with that as your motion?
I am, yes.
And
Yeah.
Councillor Carver as the seconder? You've heard the motion. Councillor Now, do you have a call on the question?
Yes, I support the moving it to 40. I wouldn't want to see us go any lower than that, but I'm still not sure how much of an effect it's going to have on some of these roads with the speeding if we don't have the enforcement to follow it. Because if they're breaking it going 50, then they're certainly going to break it going 40 with a 40 speed limit. So it might help some, but for the majority of those that are actually going above that 50, I don't think it's going to slow them down unless we can ensure somehow that we get better enforcement.
Good point. CAO?
Just further to that point, and I agree, Councillor Now, you know, infrastructure also is reinforcing of behavior. So I think that's what the minister is getting at there. I mean, you can have a rural road that's excellent pavement conditions, great visibility, and you can put a 25-kilometer-an-hour speed limit on it. You can put an 80-kilometer-an-hour speed limit on it. People know it's an 80-kilometer-an-hour road. So if there's no chance of being caught, the infrastructure says that. If there's pedestrian supporting infrastructure like sidewalks and curbs, if there's you know, speed humps as we put in on Claremont Street, then, you know, people understand that the speed limit is, you know, appropriate to the infrastructure. So I do think that there are certainly quite a number of areas of town where a 40-kilometer speed limit would not have, even supported by enforcement, much effect without corresponding infrastructure. And again, I think Faubourg Road is a good example of that.
Okay. Councillor Burdick and then Councillor Now.
I'm very hopeful that we can continue with other aspects of infrastructure like crosswalks and those other sort of mitigations too. I think that I think we've discussed that a lot, so hopefully it'll work.
Thank you. Councillor Now.
Yes, I agree with having more infrastructure. The one thing I would hope that we don't go ahead with is more of the speed humps. I'll tell you, they're causing a real problem for the fire department coming down either of those roads where they are now. You have to really slow down to go over them. And I have a feeling that down the road, we're going to see more repairs having to be done to those heavy trucks with the bouncing up and down of going over those humps. So I would hope we give it some serious thought before we go with any more of those in the town.
Thank you. CAO?
Oh, I just wanted to note that at the time we had reviewed a speed islands kind of modification of design that is used extensively in Quebec to support operations of fire trucks. So maybe having passed on that the first time around, maybe that is something that we would like to try. And to that end, modification of the existing speed humps to that design would also not be excessively difficult, is my understanding.
Did you call them speed islands, Mr. Hyde?
I did, but I may be misspeaking. We had a report where it was properly termed, so I can go back and look at how it was referenced there.
Okay.
It just basically has a little opening in between where a fire truck can position its wider wheelbase, but where your average vehicle would not be able to.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor. On the motion. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Anything else from the correspondence information items? I would note just reminded me, NSFM, it's not in that Monday memo, but the spring workshop has been reconstituted. They're breathing new life into it again. post-COVID. It's happening in May. It's happening at White Point. There's only 170 seats available because of the ability of White Point to accommodate the conference. It's not a room thing, it's a conference room issue. The conference registration opens early next week. So if you are interested to go, this is a good opportunity because it is right in Lunenburg County. You might want to consider registering early next week. And the CAO and I had discussed it, and the suggestion is that because we really haven't done much training because of COVID for the last 2 years, it would be useful for council to consider participating in this event. So just wanted to remind you of that. Councillor Now?
Yeah, do you have, right off the top there, Mr. Mayor, exact date for that?
I'd have to go look at my other calendar, but I will get it and I will send it to you. Okay? I'll send it to everybody at the end of the meeting. Okay, with that, we've already motioned that we're going to receive and file the information items. Thank you very much. Let's go on to staff reports. It's the end of the month. That's always detail time. CAO, presume you would entertain questions from council members on the staff report?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And just a quick note, we've gained one section in the manager's reports and we've lost another. We now have updates from water wastewater again. We don't have updates from finance for this month. Happy to take any questions.
Okay. Questions for the CAO. Councillor Carver.
Thank you. This is one of the questions that I sent by email earlier today, and it's about Pro Kids. And I'm just eager to understand what it's going to take to continue the dialogue. Do we have to nudge them or poke them, or what's needed? It's just because this has been on the agenda for at least 2 years now, and I always wonder what's needed to move it along.
CAO.
Yeah, I think this is one where staff have to take some responsibility. As I know to do by email, we were having a discussion with them last fall with at the staff level with MODL last fall, and just haven't gotten back to it in a couple of months. At the time, the challenge was around the way that their program is constructed and the way that we had hoped to participate in that program, and it seemed like that might be a challenge that would be intractable, but at least council would be able to have a report back that would close the loop on that. So I think this is just a reminder that we've got to talk at the staff level and figure out how to get that report back to council. And even if it doesn't point to a formal way forward, at least it would illuminate what the issues are better than I could do with a quick email.
Yeah, thank you. That would be great. Do you need a motion to have that happen, or it's just part?
No, I mean, I don't think if you're not looking to set an immediate deadline, we'll just do our best to get you a report in the near future, and appreciate the reminder because the delay is on our end.
It would be great to close the loop, as in your words.
Deputy Mayor.
So on that particular item, I've been curious about, and maybe shut me down if I'm wrong on this. In thinking about it, Pro Kids already supports kids in Mahone Bay. It's not that they turn away kids in Mahone Bay. And so the question I ask myself is, what will this cure to a certain extent? What will this poking at it and trying to get a solution, what does it cure? And I haven't really, in my mind, I don't have an answer to that. And so I would be tempted to just say, well, let it just die off. However, we've been contributing to that program, let's continue doing that. If there's no problem to fix, let's not another problem, so to speak. Yeah, create one.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. CAO, and the question that I was going to ask was, are we aware of any children in Mahone Bay who have not been able to access any of the Pro Kids programs?
I don't think we're specifically aware of that. We are aware, I'd have to look it up, but we are aware of the number of children from Mahone Bay who accessed the program last year. And to the deputy mayor's comment, the town did make a contribution of $500 to the Pro Kids program last year. What I understand, and obviously others here can speak up about this because it has been on there for quite some time. What I understand was the intention was to make a more explicit link between the contributions of the town of Mahone Bay and the accessing of the program by Mahone Bay residents. What would that change? I don't particularly think it would change anything on the end of the people applying to the program. But MODL has, responded to our last donation and said, with a little bit of confusion, thank you, we'll add it to the pile for all recipients of Pro Kids, regardless of where they are, originating. So basically, they're not looking at the geographic boundaries. And in the offering of our donation, we are also not looking at the geographic boundaries. And that's essentially where we ended up last year.
Deputy Mayor? And then
And-
Councillor Carver.
Yeah, thank you. And I think from my perspective, I think that's where that's where our eyes should be at, not focus on how many kids are from Mahone Bay, because for me that's not very helpful. Because if we are I guess even if our kids from Mahone Bay don't access that program, we can assist other kids who are not able to participate by giving to Pro Kids. So I would, if council is amenable, I would say let's just kill that effort by staff, and not have both of them to go through that, and have it resolve itself, and we continue to fund them the way we've done in the past without necessarily requiring that direct association to how many kids from Mahone Bay accessing the program.
Okay, Councillor Carver.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad that the deputy mayor has raised or provided some clarity about that. When the question first came up 2 years ago, it was posed in the context of the belief that children in Mahone Bay weren't able to access the Pro Kids funding. So if something's changed, or if that belief was incorrect, whatever. I mean, if we're happy with the way things are working, then absolutely let it drop. So,
Okay.
but if we're not happy with the way things are working, then let's work it out.
Thank you, Councillor Carver. CAO.
Yeah, just in terms of access, and I think it is a fair point. I was responding to Deputy Mayor's point about if people apply, are they being able to have a go at the funding just like anyone else? And my understanding is if people apply, they are. But the challenge that we talked about in terms of access is around the understanding of Mahone Bay residents that they are able to apply, which we're not able to promote. So you don't see something in the mayor's newsletter saying the Pro Kids program is open for
Sign up.
applications, because although applications do go into MODL, Mahone Bay residents are not actually included in the promotion of the program to MODL residents.
CAO, would you like a motion from council that the Pro Kids issue is deemed resolved at this point?
I think if council's inclined to at least leave it where it is until we hear something from MODL that would indicate a need for council to discuss this issue again, I would say that staff be directed to, as you say, to no longer pursue or to cease pursuing response from MODL with respect to the Pro Kids program. And we could just, if somewhere down the road MODL chooses to engage with the town about it on their end, then obviously we'd bring it back to council's attention.
And that would take it off the staff report?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Entertain that motion, Councillor Carver?
Well, I'm not going to make the motion, but I just wanted to ask how does that address the issue of Mahone Bay residents not being fully aware of their eligibility to apply for that? for the pro kids.
CAO.
I just wanted to be explicit that I don't think it does address that issue. I think that's where that's where we were. So that, you know, status quo, we would still be there.
Deputy Mayor.
So I guess my direct question would probably be, is there anything limiting us from providing that communication that Mahone Bay residents can access ProKid?
Go ahead.
I think the only thing that's limiting it is that MODL might see that promotion and turn around to the town and say, what are you doing? You know, you're not formally participating in this program. So it's only at risk of then provoking a need to formally resolve the issue, I suppose.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah. So as a follow-up, I would say, let's promote it that way. And now, if it provokes the question, then we can deal with the issue, because what we tried before wasn't dealing with I guess officially with the issue, but we know that our kids do access ProKids if they go through that process. I would say we don't necessarily have to promote it very fervently, but once in a while in the mayor's newsletter, just say there's ProKids that people can access. And let's see where that lands us.
Councillor Now and then Councillor Carver.
Yeah, I fully agree with let's proceed. We can not full out blindly promote it, but like Deputy Mayor said, if we put it in the mayor's newsletter every once in a while that the program is there, if anybody wants to apply for it, and then if we get feedback, then we can go back to MODL and said, well, we would like to be part of it.
Councillor Carver.
It feels like we're going around in circles.
Yeah.
But I think I would be inclined or more in favor of the idea of asking directly or saying directly to Modal, we would like to let our citizens know that this resource is available. Please advise us how to go about doing that, or something to that effect.
CAO.
Just
Go ahead,
if there
Mr.
were to be a motion coming that referenced that line of thinking, Councillor Garber, just wanted to suggest that the motion could also discharge the prior direction if it were expressed as to direct staff to write a letter to MODL and then insert the contents of that letter, and that this direction replaces prior direction concerning the ProKids program. Something along those lines. Just if we do mean to, because there was a discussion about how do we discharge the previous item. Otherwise, we do the letter, but it wouldn't change the fact that that would stay on our list, and I will do my best to get some kind of a report back to council.
Okay, does someone wish to make that motion? Councillor Carver?
I would like to make the motion if the clerk is able to capture how the CAO just framed it. It's about the motion would be something like this: to direct staff to advise Modal of the town's wish to let town residents, or to make town residents aware of the availability of the ProKids program, and to discharge the previous direction to staff. Does that sort of do it?
Okay. Clerk shaking your head in the affirmative. Do we have a seconder? Deputy Mayor will second. It's been moved and it's been seconded. Deputy Mayor, on the question?
So I was seconding so that we can have a conversation about it. I'll support it anyways, but I think sometimes I think approaches are important, and forcing the issue to have that conversation if it's necessary is also another approach. I don't think Modal will have, from my perspective, I don't think Modal will have an issue with us promoting or saying our residents can access, because they've accessed before. And I don't think they will be flooded by many Pro Kids application from Mahone Bay, so to speak, after that fact, which is what would cause, I guess, them to reach back and ask, oh, why are you promoting this? So I would be more favorable for the approach. Let's discharge this from staff's report so that they don't have to keep reporting on it, and let's promote it to the community that Pro Kids is available, and then to a certain extent have a rest and not see it on our reports for quite a while. If it comes back, we can deal with it.
Clerk, will the motion as it is now worded provide the opportunity to advise the citizens of Mahone Bay that the Pro Kids program is out there and available?
The letter as it is, the motion as it is now worded, is that council directs staff to write a letter to Modal advising the town of Mahone Bay's wish to make town residents aware of the availability of the Pro Kids program, and that this direction replaces prior direction regarding the Pro Kids program. My assessment of this is that it is not saying that it is not directing staff to publish it. It is directing staff to tell Modal that we want to do that and then see what happens.
Okay.
That's my assessment of what this would be, but
what we're going to say does not deal with accessibility for the people of the town. All it deals with is the capacity of the town to tell people that the Pro Kids program is available. Whether they ultimately are accessible or not is another issue. We're just going to tell them that it's available. CAO?
Nodding to your question, but then just additionally, I wanted to correct Clerk, if you don't mind, and Councillor Carver, you can agree with me if I'm getting this correct, but you had actually phrased the motion, advise MODL rather than staff directed to write a letter to MODL. And I believed that to have been an intentional distinction, because a letter would imply it goes on their council agenda, whereas advise would imply that it's an email. So do we want it to stick with the way you phrased it, which was advise, or the way Mo wrote it, which was to write a letter, which was my fault. I initially phrased it that way as well, but you perhaps correctly said advise instead.
Councillor Carver?
I appreciate the distinction, and I would stick with advise based on that distinction. And I, in response to the deputy mayor's comments, it was not my intention to go ahead and tell town residents that they're eligible for the Pro Kids. I was taking the other approach. So the motion's on the floor. There has been a seconder. We can vote on it, and if it passes, it passes. If it doesn't, then the other approach might be tried.
Okay. You've heard the motion. We've had discussion on the question. Is there any more discussion on the question? Hearing none on the motion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, thank you. We'll take that off the report. Continuing, Mr. Hyde, does anyone have any other issues on the report they would like to discuss? Nothing? Entertain a motion to accept the report as presented. Moved by Councillor Now, seconded by Councillor Carver. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Council accepts the report as presented. All in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, CAO. Let's go to item 6.2, staff report on the public participation policy. CAO.
Just a quick introduction to the policy, and then if there are questions, I may end up yielding them to Mo, as she is the author of this. But just to note here that we have some necessary amendment to the public participation policy, which is being driven by a update to the Municipal Government Act. So Maureen has put together the recommended change, and what we're suggesting is the council adopt the amended public participation and planning policy.
Public participation.
And the necessary amount of time for this has elapsed because this was previously presented to council.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
Your Worship, I'd like to move that council adopt the amended public participation and planning policy as outlined in the document in our package.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Burdick. You've heard the motion. On the question. Councillor or Deputy Mayor Kangata, do you have a question?
Basically it's a question about process from a policy perspective. I mean, opposed, not similar to how bylaws go. We don't have public information sessions or public hearings for policy. Is that right or wrong?
No, that is correct.
Yeah, and so I was wondering why that's the case. Why the public doesn't get a chance to chime in.
CAO, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I guess a two-part. So the MGA requires that policies be presented to council members a minimum of 7 days prior to their being voted on. So the MGA doesn't provide any additional requirement, whereas some of the hearing requirements with respect to bylaws originate in the MGA. Now, we have added some additional requirements over and above that, but that would be the origin of the distinction. As an additional part, why do we do it the way we do it? And does that provide an opportunity for public comment? It is an enhancement on the MGA because the way we present it more than 7 days in advance is that we present it on an open council meeting agenda, and then the voting takes place on the next council meeting agenda, citing that effectively a de facto public notice has been provided. And as long as council continues to have public input sessions prior to regular meetings of council, there is in fact an opportunity for public comment 15 minutes prior to the council meeting for anything on that agenda. So after it's appeared on the first agenda, then would a citizen have a desire to, they could join the public information session at the beginning of the following meeting to provide their comment. Essentially, it's a light version of the required advertisement in newspaper public hearing that must take place half an hour prior to the meeting and be separately televised. So it's basically a light version, but it does allow for some in between that and a motion of council, which obviously can happen and be voted on at the same time. So essentially somewhere in between. Why the distinction in legislation, and our distinction is a lighter and a more comprehensive version in terms of engagement, is because generally bylaws are understood to have an impact on outside of town operations. Basically, a bylaw governs the way that people in town, residents of town, property owners, behave, the way they can enjoy their property, the way that they relate to each other and to the town in a manner that is different from a policy, which typically governs the way that the town operates. And that can be the way that the town operates internally, like human resources policy, or like this one, the way that the town operates with respect to the clients that are being served to the public. I hope that helps both on why we do it and what we do.
Councillor Carver has a question.
Yes, it's about the publishing, the information. And I noticed that it mentions newspaper and the town website and posting a notice, and I wondered about including social media in the way that the information is posted or the public is advised. That's in section 3.3.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could certainly be just added as a, I think safely non-substantive amendment. So council passes the amended policy as amended to reflect the inclusion of social media in the list of advertisements. I know it says the amended policy as amended, but that would be the correct way to phrase it, I believe.
Thank you.
Okay.
So we just
So
need we need the mover and the seconder to agree.
I was
if we
going to
wanna
say,
get-
Counselor Wilson, do you accept that friendly amendment? And I think Counselor Burdick was the seconder. You agree? Okay, moved and seconded that as amended, we will, council, I'm just looking for the wording of the amendment here. Council adopt the amended public participation in planning policy as amended. Okay, you've heard the motion. On the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go on to, 6.3, the staff report on video surveillance policy. This will link us back to the earlier item.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I could just quickly introduce and then we'll take any questions or comments.
Okay,
So again, this one, just to note for anyone viewing, this was initially introduced at council's previous meeting on the 12th of, the 8th of March, and therefore is due for eligible to be voted on tonight. Unlike the previous policy, which arose from legislative change at the provincial level, this one arose from discussion at the Police Advisory Board, wherefrom council received a recommendation and passed the direction to staff to produce this report and a draft for consideration of council.
okay, thank you. Councillor Burdick?
Thank you. I was looking at the at this proposal here for the policy, and looking at the Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioner of Nova Scotia, and it's quite detailed there. And I was really, obviously, you all really know what you're doing. So, but it was pleasing to see the sections where it mentioned looking for alternatives at any time where this comes up, looking for alternatives before placing video surveillance in effect. So that also brings up what we were discussing earlier, which makes me think still, even though I do support this policy, I also do think that maybe these other things that might be considered in advance of the video surveillance should be discussed more in full, and perhaps then, much as I dislike moving things from place to place, it still seems like it would be part and parcel of a larger discussion at a policy and strategy meeting.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor, were you going to comment?
Yeah. I think my previous question around process is almost also linked to this policy, in the sense that yes, we've had a few opportunities to have conversations about the policy, but I would strongly believe not a significant portion of residents have an idea that this policy is being suggested. Not because we've not communicated, but I think today, yesterday having participated in another municipality and their planning process reviews, my conclusion is that most of the time residents will be curious and interested in agenda items that are on council if, to a certain extent, they touch on what they're interested in to a certain extent. Most of the time, there is a certain percentage of folks who will be interested continuously and they'll keep a tab on things, but the larger majorities, most of the time, will only get to council issues, and the solar garden is a very clear example. We've learned that. So I think we probably have a good policy here that we can work with, but the implications of that policy long term for the community, for me, I think are significant. That significant enough that residents need maybe something similar to a public information session or somewhere where council actually has an opportunity to say, well, we want to focus on this. This is something that we're introducing. And so with that in mind, it would be very helpful for us if we are saying graffiti, for instance, is the instigator of this policy to come into place, that it not be seen that it's just because of graffiti we are looking towards surveillance as an option when we haven't even, at least from my perspective, explored like the other options that were suggested in the letter that we received tonight. So my suggestion would be for us to maybe slow this down a little bit and have a comprehensive conversation to include some of the suggestions that have been made, and maybe take this back to the police advisory, but ensuring that the whole of council is at that particular police advisory committee meeting, where we can discuss this policy plus the other options that might be available to address that the graffiti situation, and whether this policy is the only vehicle that we can use, and knowing that it's not just, from my perspective, just limited to this instance. If we put in a policy like this, we're not just talking about graffiti, we're talking about many other things that it can be used for. I hope I made sense by that long ramble, but my suggestion is that we slow it down rather than vote on this policy tonight. Have a comprehensive discussion about addressing that graffiti issue with other suggestions that have been brought to light for us at policy and strategy, and then come up with a more comprehensive solution and ensure that we can inform the public that this is something we want to introduce and do.
Any other comments? Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. Just a quick comment. It just seems to me, especially in light of the fact that I just discovered tonight that there are no laws or bylaws against graffiti, so I'm not sure we could do anything to these kids if we did catch them. This seems to me to be the nuclear option for us for what is a relatively minor misdemeanor, although obviously unsightly. I think the RCMP, who have all the options available to them for anything they consider to be serious crime, can do whatever they need to do with regard to video surveillance. But I guess I agree with the notion of let's look at other options, and I would prefer to see this idea die on the vine.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
Yes, I agree in the sense of having a sense of antipathy about the idea of video surveillance in our tiny, beautiful town, and would prefer to look at other options. And I think I mentioned at a previous meeting that there is evidence that removing graffiti as soon as it's discovered goes a long way to discouraging it. So, I mean, I would rather see something, a policy or a practice procedure that something to the effect that as soon as we are aware of graffiti, that town staff will remove it or paint it over immediately. So as soon as possible. So, and we're working on any of the other, and really boosting up our efforts to encourage citizens to report, send photos in as soon as they see it, so that there's a very quick turnaround, and any other of that kind of measure that we could invent.
Mm-hmm. Councillor Burdick, did you have a comment? And then we'll go to the clerk.
Yeah, I was going to make a motion that would be to place both Nick Pavlinich's letter as well as this proposed video surveillance policy on an upcoming policy and strategy committee meeting for a more a larger discussion.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, I'm sorry, Clerk was next and then Deputy Mayor.
Your worship, if with the motion on the floor, it's probably best to get a seconder before coming to my comment, if that's okay, just procedurally.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, is that what you're offering to do? Okay. Clerk. You're on mute, Clerk.
Sorry, I clicked, but apparently not hard enough. My apologies. I just wanted to make a comment about some of the things that were said about, first of all, if staff respond right away to painting over graffiti and stuff like that when it comes up. That was actually happening, and it wasn't addressing it. And the issue becomes that, you know, those same staff that would paint that over are then have to leave it to go salt the road and shovel the road and clear sidewalks and fire hydrants and that sort of thing. We have a very small staff, and if someone's, in this case, very determined, then it does build up rather quickly. The other comment was about the RCMP being able to follow up, and even with people reporting information to staff. This issue did come up when the RCMP suggested putting in like a trail cam that takes pictures of movement. That's where this issue came up. And we still end up with the issue when if graffiti or vandalism or whatever is reported to staff, then we're still in the position of what do we do about it? The last couple years previous to this, the biggest issue has been off-highway vehicles in Jubilee Park. We've been hearing about that a lot. And we actually had an incredibly dedicated RCMP member that had that file. And in addition to his colleagues on different ships or whatever, that particular member really spent a lot of time up there. And but, you know, people just don't go there when there's a cop there. We ran into the same situation with our bylaw enforcement officer. So we still end up in the same situation of how do we identify and then follow up. So not to, you know, in any way argue with the motion that's been made is certainly not my place anyway, just to really clarify that while that came up for when the discussion comes up again later on. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else on the question? Clerk, can you read us the motion, please?
That the draft video surveillance policy and the letter from Mr. Plevenik, which I'm sure I'm pronouncing incorrectly, be forwarded to an upcoming agenda of the Policy and Strategy Committee.
Okay. You've heard the motion. On the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. It goes to the Policy and Strategy Committee for further review. Okay. Councillor Carver.
Yes, it still leaves the question of a reply to Mr. I don't have his name in front of me, so I can't remember. Thank you. And I'd like to move that a letter be sent to him saying thank you for your concern and that the matter has been referred for further discussion by council.
Okay. Councillor Burdick.
I'm seconding that.
Okay. Any comments on the question? You've heard the motion. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Okay. Thank you. Let's go to the staff report 2021-22 write-offs. CAO, please.
So I think this is quite a standard item. It happens annually at this time of year, but
Yeah.
just to quickly preface that item and the recommendation to council on it. Each year, outstanding accounts are reviewed by staff to determine the chance of collection. Outstanding accounts with a low chance of collection are sent to the province. If the province is successful in collecting a payment, a portion of those funds will be received. The auditors recommend that, given the low chance of collection, the town write off these amounts, but I will specify that that doesn't preclude them being collected or revenue being returned from the province. So the write-off of these accounts does not change that they are still, that they have been referred, but they, were they to be, remain uncollected, it would not affect our allowance for uncollected. So there is a
Okay.
recommendation included with respect to utility, electric and water accounts, of which these don't include any tax accounts.
Okay. Thank you, CAO. Do we have a motion? Councillor Burdick?
I'd like to make a motion that council write off accounts in the amount of $2,118.49, $1,701.87 from the electric utility, and $416.62 from the water utility as presented.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, seconds? You've heard the motion. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Let's go to the strategic plan review on public engagement. Who's
So
driving the
just
bus
to
on
quickly
this?
note, I guess this follows on the earlier hearing. So a couple of the items don't have a document because they were being generated tonight. So the report of the clerk, item A, Maureen, do you want to take that?
A public hearing was held on March 24th, 2022 to receive verbal and written submissions regarding the 2022 annual review of the Town of Mahone Bay 2021-2025 strategic plan. 6 members of the public were in attendance via the town's YouTube channel. There were no public participations, no public comments during the hearing or to the hearing, sorry. 6 submissions from the public were received prior to the hearing, and there were no written submissions received at the hearing as well. And the hearing adjourned at 6:49 p.m. Thank you, Worship.
Okay.
And so that leads into the report concerning public engagement activities up to and including the hearing, but obviously there were initial survey activities that also took place, and that was provided in the package ahead of the meeting. So a number of different things for council to consider. Ultimately, I just wanted to put this in the context of, why do we do this before providing the recommendation here. So each year, the town's strategic plan is a review is prescribed prior to going to the annual budget process. And the intention of that review is for council to make any potential amendment to the plan that may be deemed appropriate in light of the feedback received during the public engagement phase of review, which we've just completed. And so if council wishes to do so, staff can be directed to produce amendments to the plan. Otherwise, the plan would remain unchanged. In any case, whatever the resulting version of the plan is, that would, as always, inform the annual budget process. So if there were changes there that could impact then projects that are referenced from the strategic plan. So hopefully that's clear. The recommendation on this report is to accept for information. That doesn't preclude council from here determining how discussion might continue on the various things that have been received through both the earlier engagement phase or tonight's hearing.
Comments? Deputy Mayor?
I was just curious, similar to the meetings we had when you were doing the putting together the strategic plan. Do we have a window where, not necessarily determined by the budget, but a window where we could discuss this input in a much more elaborate manner to figure out if we want to include some of the changes?
CAO?
Well, I think this is almost definitionally what the Policy and Strategy Committee is for. I said you said not to link it to the budget, but from my perspective, it would be ideal if this could find its way onto the agenda for the next Policy and Strategy Committee in order to come back with some kind of not the one that's next week, the one in April, in order to come back to council with some opportunity to make any amendments as might be foreseen by the committee prior to the annual budget process.
Deputy Mayor, and then Councillor Carver.
Yeah, so in that case, if council is amenable to it, I would propose that we set the agenda for the April strategy and policy and strategy committee meeting to be just this, and get it done. I'll move that motion once Councillor Carver has had an opportunity to speak.
Okay, Councillor Carver.
No, that I was going in that direction too. Exactly. I think that it does need more discussion, and I will second the motion of the deputy mayor when he makes it.
Okay. Councillor Carver, I'm sorry, Councillor Wilson.
I'm assuming that motion has been made and seconded, and I'm fine with that. I'm wondering if it would be possible for someone on staff to take all of the input that is in this document and collate it in a way so we have some sense of how many people agree with a particular issue or disagree with a particular issue, so that because it's very difficult to read 12 comments on item A and 12 comments on item B and so on, and get a sense of what the aggregate is.
And I can't believe that this opportunity was presented to our citizens and 12 people responded.
You think that's too many or not enough?
So I mean, I cannot understand how council is going to be able to make an extrapolation of what's here to that plan on the observations of 12 people. Anyway, Councillor CAO.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So got a little distracted by the last comment, but that's not why I had put up my hand with respect to the 12 people, but to Councillor Wilson's previous comment about the way that the materials could be presented. I think we had a bit of a conversation when we were talking about the approving of the engagement plan around open-ended commentary versus survey questions. We ended up doing both. It is, very challenging for staff to take something that has been, meticulously crafted by a resident, obviously with an intention to make associations as they mean to, and, fit that into some other type of a format. So it's, we generally struggle to take a qualitative response like this one and turn it into a quantitative response where it's yay or nay on a particular subject. We could potentially highlight certain sections if council's looking for, any time that a specific subject is being referenced. But as far as trying to say, so many people were in favor of or believe something was necessary to change, I would be concerned about staff essentially paraphrasing what the residents have provided here as a full, package. And I know that's not super helpful, but I'm not sure we can make it a lot easier to parse.
Councillor Burdick, and then
I'm-
Councillor Carver.
Thank you. I'm hopeful that, we have some time now. Part of the feeling of this is that, we get the information and it's just the way timing works. So that there's a fair amount to absorb there, even though there are 12 participants. Some of them were quite detailed. If we have the meeting later in April, then we have some time to to parse what was given to us. And 12 is not a lot, but it's more than us. So it is a somewhat helpful guide there. And I did want to ask, if I may, a pin to this is can people still continue sending in remarks or comments on it, even though the time has passed, that could be forwarded?
CAO?
I think we had that question when we did the original round of engagement on the strategic plan last summer, and the answer was that any correspondence would, of course, be treated as correspondence. And I think actually we did have that last time. So in that this is now deferred, or the motion we are discussing is to defer this to, or refer this rather, refer not deferred, to policy and strategy in April, then the intervening council meetings, of which there are 2, would both be opportunities to recognize correspondence and forward said correspondence to that policy and strategy committee meeting. So yeah, there is definitely an opportunity for something to trickle in.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Carver.
I just wanted to clarify, is it 12 or 13 contributions that we've had so far? I think am I right in thinking we had 12 as of Wednesday, but today there was another written submission. So my arithmetic, that made 13. I see the clerk wants to comment on that. And then I had something else to say.
Clerk?
There were 12 submissions, but one of the written submissions received, the 12 did include the submission that was sent to council today. However, one of the written submissions did note that that person had also participated in the survey. So we have 12 submissions, but by reading one of the comments, it would actually say that we had 11 participants.
Oh, 11.
Out of 850. Go ahead, Councillor Carver.
And I do, the other comment was that in fact, I, like Councillor Wilson, had asked if it was possible to do, more aggregate reporting about the topics. But I do appreciate the attempt by staff in the report to comment on the trends in a more general way. So that's helpful. That does provide some direction. And it was certainly on the basis of what that report, that section of the report, I did feel some need to look at amendments in the strategy.
Okay. Anyone else? Deputy Mayor.
Yes, I guess I'm hoping we'll all vote to put it on policy and strategy, but I felt it's important to mention that whether it's 1 or 2 or 3 members of the community that speak to us, it's important not to minimize the number, because those 2 or 3 have made that, I guess, commitment to the others might have not maybe felt they needed to write or participate. Not maybe they didn't have comments, or maybe they did not find the opportunity to do that. So for me, the numbers, yes, if it was a statistics survey and we're doing stats and we're doing a statistical analysis, you'd have to work out whether it's a critical sample. But this just gives us I think, a taste of what the community might be thinking about. And it's us who sort of in many ways figure out, does that give us some questions that we can work with to see whether we need to change some of the elements. From my perspective, I don't see that we will say, well, 10 people have said this, so we're basing on that 10 people. Somebody has suggested, for instance, there's somebody who said, asked the question, yes, you will increase diversity, but I don't see how you're increasing that. And maybe for us, it's a question of how do we make that clear in the strategic plan that this is our strategy to do that and pieces like that. So yeah, I just thought that may be something good for us to point out. We want folks to participate, even if it's 1 or 2 people who participate, we are glad for those ones, we'll take those. And hopefully next time we'll have 20, next time we'll have 30 and we'll keep increasing them.
Okay. So there's a recommended motion that council accept this report for information, or did you want to refer it to policy and strategy before we accept it? Deputy Mayor?
I thought there was a motion on the floor that we're supposed to vote on. That to refer it to policy and strategy. That was.
Okay, that's what we were talking about. So is policy and strategy a public meeting, CAO? CAO?
It's a committee meeting of council, so committee meetings are open to the public, but they have to request at the current time where they are taking place remotely. They have had to request participation in advance. I suppose my expectation is that is still the way that committee meeting will operate. However, we haven't discussed that. So
Yeah.
otherwise, traditionally, I think a member would be able to come out at the time of the scheduled meeting and attend. The intention of asking to participate was that we could provide them a means to do so electronically. But they are open to the public who attend the meeting. They're just not televised.
All right. Thank you. So on the motion, moved and seconded. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to the next item on the agenda. Town-owned electric vehicle. CAO.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just introduce this one as well. So this report follows on discussion at the last couple of different budget processes where this has been referenced as an action that was included in the town's greenhouse gas reduction action plan. In last year's budget, though the allocation was included, there was a clear discussion of council that before any action would be taken, staff would produce an additional report in this regard, and this is intended to be that report. The timing was obviously deferred, as is noted in the report, due to COVID and the substantial reduction in staff and council travel that was a result of COVID. With that changing now, and with the extreme lead time on the purchase of a vehicle, it was seen as an appropriate time to bring this back around. The recommendation in this case, as included in the report, is the council instructs staff to investigate options for the purchase of an electric vehicle for municipal use, and then a recommendation to purchase a specific vehicle be presented to council as soon as possible for approval. That direction would give us something to come back and provide a specific vehicle which staff would recommend. This report references a number of different vehicles in the range of price that would relate to the budget this year. So that's the recommendation. Happy to take any questions if there are any.
Questions? Anyone? CAO? I'm sorry, Councillor Now?
Yeah, I driving around town a fair amount lately, and the roads are getting in pretty rough shape in certain spots. I think that rather than spending $50,000 on an electric vehicle at this time would be better spent that way. I really don't see that I could support purchasing an electric vehicle at this time.
Okay, Councillor Wilson?
Yes, I think I'm on record as saying before that I'm not in favor of this project. I would like just to make a couple of points. I went back to the original documents where this is brought up, and it's brought up kind of as an aside, but in the context of what they recommended as a $60,000 2-year program for ride sharing. And I know we haven't, as far as I remember, haven't talked about that proposal at this council, but I'm wondering how the two are connected, if at all. But I will say this, and I think it's going to, if we proceed, it will be abundantly clear that the citizens of the town will look at this the way it's going to be seen as a expensive toy to be parked at the town hall and used by whoever. And I just think it's highly inappropriate.
Okay, thank you. CAO?
I guess first off to Councillor Now's comment about, I think council knows this, but just for the viewing public, fixing potholes after the winter is not juxtaposed against the capital budget item that was approved in last year's budget. So there isn't really a trade-off of do we fix the potholes or do we go ahead with this capital purchase? To Councillor Wilson's question around the car share program and the interrelation of that to this electric vehicle, at this point, about 24 municipalities, I believe, across Canada, particularly in Quebec and New Brunswick, have embarked on car sharing programs using municipal fleet infrastructure. Typically, the first step has been making one or more vehicles that are used, light duty vehicles that are used by the municipality as fleet vehicles, available to the public for use. It may be as a essentially test drive option. It may be more robustly available to people, but the intention has typically been, as a first step towards encouraging EV adoption, give residents the opportunity to use an electric vehicle that is already resident in the community. So if the town has an electric vehicle, then it would be reasonable to investigate the potential for use of that as a introductory vehicle or potential rideshare vehicle for residents, as per the Severe program in Quebec and FCM funded programs in New Brunswick. So that was referenced in the staff report as a potential rationale for future public use of the vehicle.
Councillor Carver?
I don't feel as disapproving of the whole project as Councillor Wilson, but I do think it's perhaps not the right time. I mean, it is absolutely in sync with all of our expressed values and goals and objectives for environmental leadership. But I think it's the timing isn't right. I think we have so many other things on the go right now that citizens are questioning or have questions about, that if we come back with this idea in another year or two, it might fly better.
Okay, Councillor Wilson?
I would
And then Deputy Mayor.
just add an addendum to what I said before, and that is, I'm definitely not against electric vehicles. If we have, if our fleet needs changing and there are opportunities to buy, electric pickup trucks or electric whatevers, I'm all in favor of that. I'm just not in favor of a cute little car parked in front of town hall that is going to get all kinds of negative comments from all kinds of people.
Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I think Councillor Wilson has stole my thunder, so to speak. I think I spoke about this the last time we had this conversation, that, yeah, I think going electric and being environmental stewards and showing that to the community is important. I would probably feel much more comfortable if a public works vehicle was bought, a vehicle that's being used more frequently than just the way it's proposed. Now, maybe we don't have the funds, because I presume that will probably be more expensive than what we had thought about in terms of ranges to purchase. I would be supportive of, if we're going into a car share ridership program immediately and we're saying we are piloting that, I would be in favor of that. I think that, for me, when I think about the municipalities that have sort of gone the slower route, they were testing the concept. The concept has been tested and can work. So I think if that's what we're trying to propose, I would probably be supportive of that. But as it stands right now, it doesn't really sit very well with me in terms of how the car will be utilized. So,
Any other comments? Councillor Burdick?
I noticed in this report, that there is mention of the possible options with the travel, the community use for the vehicle, but that it's sort of insurance would have to be investigated, and that would happen after the purchase of the vehicle. And maybe given the concerns tonight, I wonder if that would be possible before the purchase of the vehicle.
Okay, CAO.
Just to the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Burdick's comments, I think direction to staff in terms of a report on the potential for a car share program is certainly something that a motion can be advanced on. That is, as you note in the, and I think Councillor Wilson was the one to note, in the action referenced here in this staff report, in the council's GHG reduction plan, it does actually, reference this as a first step towards a car share program. So if, to the Deputy Mayor's comment, we're past that pilot stage, because there have been many units that have done that, staff could just be directed to produce a report on the potential to implement a car share program and then come back at it from that angle, rather than, if this motion that is presented here is not actioned, then we wouldn't be coming forward with a further recommendation about that purchase. Sorry about my phone dinging.
Is that what, it's your phone, is it? Well, there's 44 cars available, electric vehicles available in Canada, ranges in price from $40,000 to $120,000. That's for the Porsche. One of the cars that staff talks about us possibly purchasing, the Chevy Bolt, is no longer being produced because of problems that GM encountered with lithium batteries catching fire. The CBC did an extensive report on use of electric vehicles in Canadian winters in particular, because the viability of the batteries are increased by up to 40% in cold weather. There's obviously the notion of the green aspect is there. This is, well, not electric, hydrogen is the way of transportation in the future. But at this time, there are so many difficulties that are being encountered with electric vehicles. If you're living in an urban environment with access to maintenance, with access to charging facilities, one of the cars I looked at was the Nissan Leaf. And depending on the charger you've got, it can take up to 8 hours to charge it. And it only goes for 200 kilometers, which would be great if you're driving Mahone Bay and Bridgewater and back. It's going to be adequate, but it seems to me there's a lot of shortcomings with these vehicles, a lot of technical problems. And then, of course, from an environmental perspective, there's the notion of the mining for materials to make lithium batteries and then to dispose of them. Even from a firefighter perspective, you can't fight a lithium battery fire with regular firefighting gear. You've got to have special equipment. So I think if the staff report can be expanded to address these well-documented issues, I would support it. But if we can't, I don't think I can at this time. Councillor Now?
Yeah, I agree. There's been a lot of problems with them. Actually, at the end of April, I'm going on a special course to deal with them. And it's been documented. You said, well, firefighting. Right now, all we have is water and foam. And it takes thousands and thousands of gallons to put out one of these fires in an electric vehicle. Whereas a regular vehicle would probably take a few hundred at the most. So the resources aren't there. And there's been instances where the vehicle fire has been put out, it's been towed to a storage place, and they're telling people don't store them put them near anything else, because it's been documented that probably within the next few hours, you'll be called back to that same vehicle and probably be called back again. So it's ending up being 2 and 3 calls or more for firefighting. So there's certainly a lot of issues that have to be resolved with these vehicles first.
Thank you, Councillor Now. Deputy Mayor.
I mean, just reading the vibe in the room. I would not want staff to be tasked to go back and come with a report that we know in principle we will not be able to support because we're not supporting the idea, because that just creates work for them that, from my perspective, we don't have to. I guess in many ways, the sense seems to feel council is not in a position, at least maybe now in the next 6 months, to approve this to go through, and maybe we staff be patient with us, and maybe they can come back in 8 months' time with a suggestion that might be more amenable. Maybe Martha might get some ingenious ideas about electric vehicles that we might contemplate, rather than send staff back to come up with a report that we know we will not support as council.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Burdick. You're on mute, madam.
It does sound like there's some actual sort of philosophical opposition to the idea of electric vehicles, which is interesting. I would support this motion because for other reasons, and one of them being the fact of the how the vehicle would be used would be for short distances primarily. Also for people who are car poor, which are a lot of us. Transportation is a huge issue in the area. It would be an opportunity for citizens to possibly be able to go places that they need to go, So I do think that there is a certain point where the larger issues with fossil fuels are going to be, there's the difficulty with something as it's being worked out, and then there's the larger issue of what is happening in the world when something happens in a place where oil is produced, for example. There are long-term issues here that this is just a tiny incremental thing, but it could actually be of use. But that is, I'm also seeing that philosophically, there might just be a general opposition to them. We could delay and we can delay, but I'd rather I'd rather us bite the bullet one way or the other at this point to show where we're at.
Okay, CAO.
Thank you, Councillor Burdick. Yes, as you say, philosophical opposition. It is hard for staff, I think, to score some of the comments from members of council tonight around EV use in general, broadly in our society or in our community, with the objectives the council has endorsed in the passing of the greenhouse gas reduction plan. 30% of our emissions as a community come from transportation. And as long as that transportation is reliant on fossil fuels, that number is only going to go up. There's absolutely zero way to reduce that as it currently stands. So staff have another item on the agenda tonight around the appointment of members for the town's new Climate and Environment Committee. And it would seem to me that perhaps referring this report to that committee be a way to delve into the philosophical merits of electric vehicles, given that we have a committee that is being established for this purpose.
Okay, Councillor Wilson. And then
Yes,
Councillor Gerber.
maybe I was misunderstood, but what I tried to say earlier is I'm not against the concept of vehicles, electric vehicles, and all of those things. What I am against is adding a vehicle to the fleet with no specific task in mind. If staff could come to council with a proposal for a card sharing program that included 2 vehicles that were green in nature, with a very specific plan about how they were going to be used, how it was going to be marketed, and what it was going to cost, I would be all for it. But that is not this.
Okay. All right, thank you. CAO.
Oh, just quickly, I want to say, Councillor Wilson, I didn't mean to characterize your comments that way, but I think comments have been made in that way this evening. And just with respect to direction on a car share, that is still, as we said earlier in this discussion, a direction that council could provide, and staff would certainly be happy to come back with that report.
Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Carver.
Oh, no, I was,
Were you, I'm sorry, Councillor Carver, were you?
Yeah. Go,
I didn't-
go
I
on,
didn't-
Councillor Carver.
I did not see you,
the
Councillor
deputy
Carver.
and mayor and I have a long tradition of after you, Alphonse, or, but I did hear you say I was next. And I did just want to reiterate that I definitely support the idea of progressing towards the whole idea of EVs. But what we heard tonight was, I don't think it was so much a philosophical difference as a whole variety of reasons to hold off and not go fast on this particular project. I mean, that's how I'm reading the room, and it just reinforces for me the idea that this is not the right time. And I like what Councillor Wilson said about having more specific information, and that we need more information about the environmental, all the issues. And I like the idea of referring it to the newly
committee?
almost established Climate and Environmental Advisory Committee. So is that a motion to do that?
Can be.
That's a motion then to do that.
All right. Okay, just for 1 second, Deputy Mayor, do we have a seconder to Councillor Carver's motion? Councillor Burdick seconds it. Okay, Deputy Mayor, over to you.
Yes, so that motion complicates what I was about to say, because I was about to say, I would like to move that council directs staff to produce a staff report on a car sharing program that can utilize an electric vehicle that would be referred to the newly minted, the one that will soon mint, climate, I can't remember, Environment and Climate Committee, who can vet it so that they can give us some recommendations from that. The report as is now, I think in many ways, from what we've talked about, we as council are not very supportive of it. So there's no need, at least from my perspective, sending that to a committee, because we ourselves do not fully agree with it. So the committee will come back and tell us what. Yes, we agree with you. So I'd rather we send to the committee a report that sort of addresses what some of us seem to want. And I think I hope we agree that having a car sharing program that uses an EV would be something we would love to have in Mahone Bay. And maybe if we can agree on that, then maybe staff can go and produce that report. It can go to the climate committee, and then it can come back to us with a recommendation as to how we proceed. So I know there's a motion on the table, but that's where I was headed before the motion was there.
Okay.
Yeah.
CAO?
Oh, I guess I wanted to support that. I know this motion is on the table and it depends on the mover and seconder to either amend or withdraw if they're interested, but I just wanted to second that for the new members of the committee, obviously the existing report taken as it is might be a bit more difficult to understand. It certainly is not an issue for council to direct staff to produce a report on the potential for an electric vehicle car share program, and that report be delivered to the new Climate and Environment Committee for consideration. So yeah, I wanted to voice some support that I think the deputy mayor's logic around how this report as it stands would be received versus the potential to have an expanded report. So I think there's some logic there.
Okay, I lost my camera feed. There it is. Okay. We do have a motion. Sorry?
Well, I would be happy. That discussion came up, that was discussion on the motion on the floor. So as the mover of the motion that's on the floor, I would be happy to, what's the word I want? Retract.
Friendly amendment?
Is it a friendly amendment? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I believe in friendly amendments. I'm not sure they're legitimate, but
I don't either, but we do use them. So.
I know. It's a sort of a custom that we have. I think there's a procedure, but maybe we need to talk about that. So if there's a friendly amendment, it is what?
So if I could just comment, I guess the deputy mayor was proposing an amendment to the motion to refer this report to the Climate and Environment Committee to a motion for staff to be directed to produce a report on electric vehicle car share and refer that report to the Climate and Environment Committee. So that would be the amendment, was from this motion or this report to that yet to be produced report. Just in terms of the procedural thing, because I think we've been over this before, but there is a procedure for an amendment. An amendment would be moved and then voted upon in the middle of the existing motion, and then
Yes,
were it accepted, that's how you would proceed.
yes.
That type of an amendment is typically considered a hostile amendment, which is to say the mover and seconder do not need to agree. An amendment can be proposed by any member, and it would change the nature of the motion on the floor,
That's
even
right.
against the will of the mover and seconder. If
And
it
you
were
vote
passed.
the amendment first.
So that's the procedure for an amendment. It's just not deemed necessary when the mover and seconder are supportive of the amendment.
So the amendment that refers this report to the new climate committee group, or to staff for a car share, whatever. We are in fact deferring the decision on acquiring an EV at this time. Are we not? CAO?
Yeah, if this is the report that was provided to council and the motion amended as the amended motion as proposed were passed, then there would be no further action with respect to this motion that was the recommended motion in this.
Until
in
the
staff
new
report.
information was received.
And then presumably that would be a distinct motion that would come back
Yeah.
at that time. Yeah.
Okay,
The only thing I will mention is that the budget allocation stands. So when we get to budget time, if we don't have anything back from Climate and Environment Committee about a car share, we'll still have to discuss whether that budget allocation would be carried forward or not. But we have until June to get into that.
so clerk, would you read the motion, please? And the amendment?
Your worship, I don't even know.
Here
My
you go.
understanding is that it is the direction of this conversation that a motion be made that council directs staff to prepare a report on an electric vehicle car sharing program to be presented to the Climate and Environment Committee. What I am unclear of is whether Councillor Carver and Councillor Burdick just want to make that their motion, or whether Councillor Carver and Councillor Burdick are withdrawing their former motion, and then we're looking for a seconder for the deputy mayor making that motion. Please help.
So I'm inclined to withdraw my motion and to open the door for the deputy mayor's motion. That's my inclination, if the seconder agrees.
Councillor Burdick, do you agree?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. So, Deputy Mayor, this is all your fault. Do we have a seconder for the deputy mayor's motion? Councillor Wilson seconds the motion? Thank you. I think that's what he's doing. Are you seconding, Councillor? Okay. Been moved and seconded. On the motion. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you.
And I just wanted to thank everyone for taking the time. I know that was a little difficult, but it's great from staff perspective for Martha to know where to put her focus on this stuff. So that's great. Thank you.
Okay. The town council policy amendment is the next item. I was just thinking, if we don't appoint anybody to the committee, what happens then? Deputy Mayor.
So I have a strange request. We normally take a break at 9.
Yeah.
As a single parent tonight, I was hoping to have that break because it's crucial. I was wondering whether we can have one.
I think it's a good idea.
Same.
10 minutes. It's 9:20. 10
Town
minutes.
clerk.
We'll reach 9:30. Deputy or clerk.
Can I ask everyone to mute, please, while the deputy clerk and I figure out what's going to happen on YouTube?
Okay.
Thank you.
10
So,
minutes
10
of blank
minutes.
screens and no sound for anybody
Is that
watching.
enough, Deputy Mayor? Okay, 10 minutes it is. Who's hosting, Maureen?
Kelly is still there.
Okay. Kelly, can you start my video, please? When I tried to start it, it tells me the host stopped it. Oh, she's asking me to start it. There we go.
I have
Thank
the
you, Kelly.
same, I have the same problem. Oh, there we are. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hyde is back. Everybody's watered and whatever. Let's then go back to the council policy amendment. Okay. CAO.
Just a quick introduction to this one. There have been some legislative changes again in this case, this time having to do with the permission for councils to operate remotely. The experience of COVID obviously has given the province a chance to contemplate whether municipalities can reasonably provide opportunities for residents to participate in municipal meetings, and therefore, subject to our own policy, we are now able to provide that, even though the state of emergency has ended, that subject to the need to accommodate resident participation, things can be conducted by electronic facilities. So we had an amendment to this, early on in COVID to facilitate carrying out our council meetings remotely when needed. And now that there's been some legislative changes, there's an opportunity to make those changes on a more permanent basis. So the clerk has recommended some amendment to the policy, which would bring it better into alignment with the new legislation and in general, council's continuing use of electronic facilities as appropriate for council, and particularly at the discretion of council and committees for committee meetings, which may continue to wish to utilize remote facilities as council may wish to do on occasion or for the participation of an individual member. So in any case, there's a recommended policy here, amended policy, which is only being presented tonight, and therefore the motion included is for council to approve this policy or adopt this policy as amended on April 12th after due consideration. In the meantime, if there are any comments at this time, or if there is no direction from council this time, it will be on the agenda on April 12th to vote on this motion.
So it gets deferred to the 12th of April?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
that automatically it would be.
Yes, and can I ask clerk if the amendments and adjustments that are being recommended are all focused on the notion of electronic meetings as amended by MGA?
Yes, they are. Specifically, it references a section of the MGA that enables us to do that. And the other, it just references the section of the MGA that enables us to do that. And with that section of the MGA, council is able to determine how they do it. So that does, as the CAO said, if we sort of dial back our language a bit, we can set what is normal for council and for each committee. And the MGA references requirements about notification and that sort of thing that we would follow.
Okay. Councillor Carver has her hand up, Deputy Mayor, over there, and then we'll come to you.
Thank you. So I may be missing some of the nuance here. which has to do with what would justify us making a decision to hold a meeting electronically in the context of these proposed changes?
Clerk?
If that's to me, really what this does is allow council to make that decision. So the section of the MGA that's referenced does include notification. It says that if a council meeting were to be held electronically, that should be included in the notification. So council, for instance, might say, you know, in years past, we only had one March meeting because we had so many people that would go away at the end of March. This council, you know, a few years down the road, and hopefully with COVID stuff behind us, people may start to do that again, and council might look at that and say, you know, we're not going to have enough people in Mahone Bay, but if we hold the meeting electronically, then we could still have a regular meeting of council, for instance. The biggest issue to my mind for dialing that back, again, it's all council's decision, and it references how it is normally done. So council gets to set what would be done. To me, the biggest issue is that dialing back our language allows us to consider things like accessibility, you know, mobility issues, as well as other disability-related accessibility, as well as scheduling. There's been a lot of talk around the council table in my years with the town about what do we do to be more accessible to members of the public that have different schedules, that have young children at home, that sort of thing. The deputy mayor just now was able to step away and deal with some household stuff because this meeting was being held electronically. So we, for instance, have the Police Advisory Board meeting, which meets at noon on a Thursday. That works for the people that are on that committee, and those people are able to participate on their lunch break from work. It gives us more options. So for me, one of the biggest aspects of presenting it this way is that council gets to set what is normal, and committees get to set what is normal and what works for them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. But it leaves me with another question, which is whether we're going to need to revise the town council policy even further to perhaps specify things like how many, how often. I'm just thinking out loud here. I can't quite formulate that anymore, but it may come up when we talk about the town council policy in the strategy and policy committee later on.
Deputy Mayor, and then we'll go to the CAO.
Yeah, and I think the final comments by Councillor Carver sort of speak to what I had in mind. We were scheduled to have I think 12-month town council policy review, and I was wondering whether there's an urgency to get these amendments through, or if they can wait until we do that. There's some pieces in the policy, so that are linked to, I guess, meeting virtually, that I have an interest in us having a conversation about, and wonder if there's any urgency to get this through today or in the next week, next meeting.
Okay, Clerk, you want to answer that question for the Deputy Mayor? Okay, CAO, we can get the clerk's response.
I would suggest that yes, there is, because we, and you know, as already been referenced in this meeting, there is a process of one meeting, an amendment comes to council, the next meeting that can be voted on by council. So that does make policies a little more flexible. And I would say that with that, it would be, I would like to see this considered, because if we put this off, all virtual meetings must stop. So that means that the April 28th meeting of the Police Advisory Board meeting, we will have to find a way to have that meeting that has met with this composition, has only ever met virtually, and that arrangements have been made for people to meet on their lunch break or whatever. that meeting will have to then be an in-person meeting while we wait for council to have that discussion. That is a committee that I am a staff resource for. So that is one that I particularly think of, but I know there are other meetings that we avail ourselves of provincial representatives or representatives from other municipalities that also make arrangements to meet virtually during their workday. And I would say there's an urgency with this that will allow so that we can continue to do that while the discussion is had. Council can then make the decision to approach it differently and then reevaluate the policy at that time. But my sense is that I think this is urgent so that we can continue, we can buy that time, have that discussion.
Okay, CAO.
A related comment. I was going to comment after Councillor Carver, but it also makes sense to to Deputy Mayor Kangata's comment to if we didn't pass this, so to Mo's point, if the existing policy stands, we would be informing all of the committees and obviously members of council that virtual meetings are over. If it did pass, then what we would be doing is we'd be reaching out, obviously to council, but also to the membership of the existing committees to ask them their preference on continuing to meet remotely versus not doing so. And so that would be the distinction in the immediate term between do we proceed with this amendment now or do we not, well, on the 12th, or do we not? And the timing is kind of intended that, by the 12th, there are no, I guess HAC would have to, would be in a little bit of limbo there, but we're trying to get this as quickly as possible after the end of the state of the emergency so that we're not forcing members to figure out how they might accommodate in-person meetings if they're not able to.
Councillor Wilson.
I've kind of lost track, and my apologies. Do we have a motion on the floor?
No, this isn't able to be acted upon until the
Then
12th.
I'd like to move that council adopt the town council policy as amended.
You can do a notice of motion for the 12th, but we're not able to.
Oh, I'm
move
sorry.
on it.
Pardon me. Yeah, all right. I'm brain dead. I forgot about that part.
Okay, Councillor Burdick.
I am seconding that motion.
Okay. You can't
Just hold that
second-
thought until the next meeting.
I'm
Yeah.
holding that thought until it's available to be.
Write it
Okay.
down somewhere.
Robert's Rules of Order, Part 2.
As I don't know if there's anything in Robert's rules about how you move on from an item which is not actually requesting any direction on the current meeting, but I guess you just, as the chair, could say, is it okay to move on?
So, are we finished our discussion? The best we're going to get tonight is notice of motion for the next meeting. Right? Okay. And we got one coming from Council Carver as well. Okay, so that will be on the agenda for the 12th of April, I think is the meeting. All right. Let's go to item number 7. Appointments to the Climate and the Environment Committee. Clerk, are you going to put anything up on the screen for this?
No, not your worship, because the information on applications has been sent to each member
Yes.
of council in confidence. Attached to your calendar invitation, you'll find I did send it out earlier today, but you will also find the compiled scores, the total of the scores that were forwarded to staff. And if council chooses to use that in their consideration, that is fine. If so, it has been our practice to refer to members of the public as by the reference letter to the left of every name until such time as someone wants to make a motion to appoint someone. At that point, a name would be used.
Okay. And Councillor Carver's hand is up and the Deputy Mayor.
So in a
And
motion,
Councillor Wilson.
if a motion is to be made, is it to be made one at a time or in a batch?
That is up to the mover.
Pardon?
Up to the mover.
Up to the mover. Right. Okay, I will. I'm done for the moment. Thank you.
Okay. Deputy Mayor,
So,
you changed locations on it.
yeah, I can see that. So I think most on council will know my my reluctance to participate in the scoring process, and then we hopefully some point we'll get to have that conversation. With this particular piece, I know that the terms of reference, to a certain extent, define that it has to be a specific number of folks from the community, and given the number of people who've applied who have an interest in this, I think there's 6, and we
Yes.
have 5 positions. I was wondering whether council would be interested in just accepting all 6 and changing the terms of reference to have at least 6 rather than 5, and not reject any of these applicants. I think that's as simple as I can put it.
Okay. Councillor Wilson, you're next.
I would be in favor of Councillor Kangada's suggestion if that can be shoved through the bureaucracy somehow.
Okay, CAO.
Amendment of the terms of reference for the committee is something that theoretically can happen on a motion of council. I just wanted to kind of point out why it's normally an uneven number of voting members versus an even number of voting members, and that may not affect council's decision in this regard, but obviously with 2 council members and 5 members of the public, that's 7 members, which means that quorum or a majority vote is 4, but with 6 members of the public and 2 members of council, that means that quorum or a majority vote is 5, so 5 to 3 versus 4 to 7, 4 out of 7. So that's usually why all committees have an uneven number of members. But that being said, if council doesn't think that's an issue, then that's the only particular sticking point there, I think. So we just have to include in any direction the revision of the terms of reference of the committee to include 6 public members.
Councillor Burdick and Councillor Wilson.
I would support that, but I do have a question, and that is, would that then be instituted as the term, so in the terms of reference going forward, or would this be manipulable each time there's a new committee? If you see what I mean, or so would this be the established number then of citizen members, 6 going forward?
Every committee has a different number, but if the motion were being made to appoint all 6, I think the motion would have to be tonight that the terms of reference be amended to allow 6 public members, a maximum of 6 public members, and that these members be appointed, or 2 motions, one amending the terms of reference and the other one appointing the members. So it wouldn't have any bearing on other committees, except that it's a precedent that can be come back to, but there's already different members of public on different committees.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Wilson.
I would like to make that motion that we amend the terms of reference of the Climate and Environment Committee to allow for 6 members of the public to serve, and that we appoint all 6 of the current applicants to that committee. And I'd like to put in paragraphs at the end because they are all very highly qualified.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, second? All right, sir. Okay, you've heard the motion. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Staff will advise the people in question. Now let's go down. Councillor Carver, donation to the Red Cross Ukraine Humanitarian Crisis Appeal. If you recall, a couple of weeks ago, there was an article that came out from FCM on municipalities providing tangible supports to the Ukraine. And I think Councillor Carver, your motion is following on that article that we had reviewed.
Yes, thank you. The FCM did make a very powerful statement, and I'll just read a bit from it to lead into the motion. So the FCM statement reads, FCM, Federation of Canadian Municipalities, unites local governments across Canada to speak with one voice. That voice is most powerful when speaking for freedom. Since the Russian attack against Ukraine, local leaders have joined together to express solidarity with the people of Ukraine and all Canadians of Ukrainian heritage. It goes on to say local governments play a vital role as promoters of peace, prosperity, and democracy for our citizens here at home and across the world. Communities are critical to the successful settling of refugees fleeing conflict, whether it be coordinating local supports, offering transit or shelter services, or taking the lead on inclusive integration. As municipal leaders, we pledge to work with the Government of Canada and provincial and territorial governments across the country to oppose this injustice and to do more to welcome those fleeing conflicts in search of safety and security. We encourage Canadians and FCM members wishing to support those impacted by the crisis in Ukraine to donate to the Red Cross's Ukraine Humanitarian Crisis Appeal. And with that in mind, I move that the Council of the Town of Mahone Bay approve a $5,000 donation to the Red Cross's Ukraine Humanitarian Crisis Appeal.
Thank you, Councillor Carver. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Burdick seconds. On the question, do we have any comments? Mr. Hyde?
Yeah, I feel compelled to point out, just for context, that our grants organization's budget this year was $6,800. So relative to all of the other grant funding that is provided by the town, this is an approximately equivalent amount to that. Not to take anything away from the cause, but just to provide council members with a bit of context around the scale of the donation being considered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other comments? Deputy Mayor.
So I guess personally, I have nothing against supporting financially the Ukraine, but I don't think I would support it from the public purse, and I wouldn't support it from the public purse because I don't think that's the same thing we've done. I think I mentioned it last time. For other countries that have faced conflict in the past, not so. There are so many other conflicts around the world that we've not given the attention that has been given to Ukraine. I don't want to take the shine of Ukraine and the support they need, but I think we've shown the support by vocalizing our support through social media, and I think I'm comfortable with that support at that level. If we decide that we want to support Ukraine, I ask the question, so what about the other conflicts? What about Palestine? What about Syria? What about Yemen? The Yemen conflict is ongoing. We've not supported them in any way, shape, or form. So, and then I guess it just creates it drives me the wrong way somehow, because Ukrainians, maybe we can relate to them a lot more, but the other folks are humans too, and we've not shone a light in what they're doing, provided the same amount of support. I feel terrible saying this because I know there's a lot of anguish going around the world, but I also feel that if I don't speak out, then we don't get to highlight the iniquity that seems to be happening. So I guess with that spirit of being, I guess, in a very awkward spot, I will not be able to support the motion. Not that I don't think it doesn't have merit, but I'm not able to support it. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Burdick.
I'm not
I'm
the
sorry,
deputy mayor.
Councillor
That's
Wilson and Councillor Burdick.
I just wanted to take this opportunity to let my schizophrenia show through, because while I agree with the deputy mayor and he forgot about Afghanistan, where we actually contributed to the carnage, there are wars going on everywhere, and we probably should not be taking our taxpayers' tax-paid dollars that they give to us and then giving it to somebody arbitrarily. I would be much happier if we set up a mechanism within the town hall that would expedite and encourage people to donate personally and get a tax credit for it. But having said all of that, I will support the motion because this is a very special case. I mean, the other places were wars and a lot of people died, but in this case, it could easily be the Third World War. And I think it's important to take a position.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Burdick.
Thank you. I do understand the reasons given for demurring or not supporting the motion. But I will also say that we are all free to propose those similar things at council for all, for any, this is part of what we can do. So these things haven't happened through council before. They can, though, and this is evidence that that can happen. So it's a way of showing tangible support in a situation which is escalating. It's gone on for a month. It's a big deal. So I do think that there's nothing stopping any of us from also proposing similar things for other parts of the world where there are conflicts, including here, or where there are iniquities here in Canada. We could have a drive for money for water in the different First Nations communities all across the country. We could have a reconciliation fund. There are many different possibilities. In this case, this is specific to Ukraine, and I think it's a really reasonable thing to do at this time.
Councillor Now.
Yeah, I support the what we're doing to support the Ukraine. I can see Deputy Mayor's points, and I certainly agree with a lot of them. What we haven't done in the past, I guess, doesn't really affect what we're going to do now and in the future. But referring back to what Councillor Wilson had said about maybe setting something up at Town Hall for members of the public to donate to the Ukraine so that they get a receipt, and maybe that would boost the effort. Would people feel comfortable with maybe lessening the amount that we're giving out of the public coffers and doing that to supplement it, or how do they do it? But I do support that we do something.
CAO, what's your reaction to the suggestion of donations through Town Hall?
While it might be technically possible, I think we're really adding very little. Anyone making a donation directly to the Red Cross is able to get a charitable donation receipt, and would be more straightforward for people to just be encouraged to do that. I do think if the town does or does not give a donation in whatever amount, we could reference that in social media or a newsletter, just to indicate that residents can do the same. So, that's certainly an option, regardless. But yeah, in terms of us taking donations and then pooling them and passing them on, I don't think that would help really in terms of people's ability to make the donations. We could look at some kind of matching donations. But again, that's more down to council's willingness to do that with the public purse, as that's been discussed tonight.
Thank you. Well, Council Carver? You still on?
Sorry,
There it is.
I couldn't get my mouse to cooperate there. I do appreciate the Deputy Mayor's comments, and it's deeply complicated. And I just want to go back to the CAO's comments before about the context, the financial context, and also a question about whether $5,000 is an appropriate amount. It was something that just sort of intuitively seemed like a good amount when I proposed it. But perhaps there's a sense that something less or more might be appropriate. So I'd be willing to entertain a friendly amendment if that was the case. Or leave it.
Deputy Mayor?
So I guess I understand the need to support this, and despite my reluctance, maybe I might be, if it was 1,000, I might think about it. It's not a huge amount, and it's for me more symbolic than substance. But I sort of want to ask, just take us a few steps back and sort of ask. So for instance, tonight, for all of us here, if I proposed, if we do the same for Ukraine, then we should do the same for Yemen. We should do the same for Syria. Tonight, would folks be amenable to that?
Don't forget Afghanistan
And Afghanistan, yeah.
and Congo, actually.
And Ethiopia.
Therein lies the rub.
So I mean, if we're ready to go down that path, then let's fully go down that path tonight, but not say, yes, we want to support that and then just do it for one. If we really dig deep inside and sort of say, yes, we want to make an impact, we want to show that we're supportive. There's so many. I mentioned just 2 or 3, but there's Congo that's been mentioned. There's Ethiopia that has conflict ongoing. Lots of people are being killed. I would say, rather than, I don't think we're ready to face that question properly. And rather than get into that without a good answer, this one for me is not a good answer. Just giving money to the Red Cross for Ukraine alone is not the message we want to send. That message would basically be saying we identifying Ukraine as a special interest group, and the question would be why, right?
Yep, Councillor Burdick.
Thanks. I mean, I don't know if a motion can be changed that way, but I would support the 5,000 being divided amongst 5 different recipients. As you're saying, though, I mean, it could be an endless list.
Yeah.
So
Frankly,
is the question you're raising, is it if you can't do it for everybody, you shouldn't be doing it for anybody? And I don't know if that's
okay.
if this is the particular time for that conversation. It's a good conversation.
Councillor now, and then CAO, and then Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, it brings up a good point about the rest of them. I'd be interested in finding out whether the Red Cross has funding or funds that they do to the other countries, so that if they did, then we could split our $5,000 up and say, let's give some to each of those. But if they don't, then I'm not sure how we would go about supporting the other countries that are in conflict.
How many countries are in conflict, I wonder? Well, we're probably talking $10 a country by the time you break it down. But frankly, that's why the proclamation policy that we've got is as simple as it is, but that's why we've got it. Because council has great difficulty in the past of differentiating between we'll accommodate this one, but not that one. Right? And now we're talking taxpayers' money. However, just let me have a look at my list. That was CAO, you're next. Then Deputy Mayor.
I guess a little bit like Councillor Now's point, I just, in the question of how do you donate to addressing conflict-related costs around the world or conflict relief-related costs around the world, I do think that the Red Cross and Red Crescent organization is the appropriate organization in that respect. So, to find a way to make a donation to the Red Cross, Red Crescent for international conflict relief that is not tied to the resolution of a particular conflict, I'm sure that is not an impossible feat.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor, then Councillor Councillor Carver's got her hand up, then Councillor Wilson. So Deputy Mayor, you're up.
No, I'll rest my comments, I think.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carver and then Councillor Wilson.
This is such a good conversation, and it's hard and it's valuable. I am willing to revise the motion to read something like, inspired by the atrocities in the Ukraine, this council of the town of Mahone Bay pledges $5,000 to the Red Cross or Red Crescent, whichever is most appropriate, on behalf of conflicts worldwide. I mean, wherever they may exist, or the back end of that needs revision, but the principle.
The thought being that it would be the Red Cross or the Red Crescent that would determine where's the most need to be addressed.
But the piece I would like to have in there is inspired by the atrocities, the current atrocities in the Ukraine. That a donation be made of $5,000 to the Red Cross or the Red Crescent in recognition of conflicts elsewhere in the world as well. I can't finish it off very well, but I think you're getting the point.
Councillor Wilson?
I think we need to, if that's a real motion, we need a seconder.
Well, I'm just revising my original motion. So if the original motion accepts that revision, that would work.
Okay. So that's a friendly amendment that changes the specificity of where the donation is going to go.
And we have a second.
I was the seconder, and if I may, is that okay?
Yes.
Or okay.
You're
I
next
don't know.
on my list.
Well, Councillor Wilson is, but if there's this amendment happening, I'm seconding. So I would like to respond to that. Okay. I don't know if I support that as amended. I'm not sure about the inspired by, and I would also ask the question, if during the Second World War there was a similar thing that happened, would you be saying, well, there are other things happening, there are lots of conflicts, because there were conflicts happening everywhere. Conflict it happens. It's a unfortunate human thing, and but sometimes we have to make specific decisions, and I think we can be specific as to where things are going. And so I would more support either saying this is specifically for Ukraine, maybe at a lesser amount, or saying this is for Ukraine, this is for Congo, this is for Afghanistan, or whatever, because you can be specific when you're donating. I don't, to me, it's like either you do it or you don't do it.
Now, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I'm guessing we don't have a seconder for that motion, but I would still like to talk to the intent of that motion, which is now we're talking about just taking taxpayers' money and just giving it away because as a kind of a general, let's give away some money because there are wars all over the world. So I'm afraid I've just moved into the deputy mayor's camp and will no longer be able to support any of the above.
Okay. Councillor Carver.
Yes, well, in that case, my original motion still stands, and with a reduced amount of say 2,500
To go to the Red Cross for the Ukraine.
on behalf of Ukraine.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Carver's motion? Councillor Burdick seconds. Okay. You've heard the motion. It's been seconded. On the question. All in favor? Opposed? I'm going to go in favor of the motion if that's not unacceptable. I do think the Ukraine is an abominable situation that needs relief. I can appreciate what the deputy mayor has said, and that may be another decision for another day. CAO?
Oh, just you said if that's acceptable. So procedurally, when you ask who's in favor, if you haven't said that you're in favor, then
I'll take the if that's acceptable out, CAO.
okay.
It's an unqualified yes.
Okay. Just so you know, you should declare your yes before you ask if anyone's a no. Just going forward.
Okay, that's done. Motion carried. Let's go down to the committee reports. We've got the Asset Management Committee, the Oakland Lake Committee, the Cemetery Committee, and the Electrical Utility Resource Sharing Advisory Committee. And I don't know if that one's got a motion in it or not. No, it doesn't. So does anyone have any questions about any of those reports? Councillor Now.
I would just move that those reports be received and filed, Your Worship.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Carver seconds. All in favor? Motion is carried. The reports are filed. Under new business, I think we have Councillor Carver, notice of motion.
Yes, thank you. I was interested this week that members of council received communication that was sent to the mayor's deputies, mayor's wardens, deputies circulation list, and so that was a first in my experience on council. And it it just revived an old question that has come up several times, which has to do with the communication channels around between council and that group, mayors, wardens, deputies, and CAOs.
Mayors, wardens, and CAOs, and deputies, yeah.
Deputies.
And CAOs.
So I do intend to make a motion at the next meeting that has to do with receiving more communication about what topics are being discussed and what results or what outcomes. So it's going to be along those lines. I haven't quite formulated it, but I will do so before the next meeting. That's my notice of
Okay.
motion.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, you have one as well?
I do, thank you. Maybe two. Number one is I move to authorize the payment to the Senior Safety Advisory Council, an amount of $1,000. That'll be coming up at the next meeting.
Okay.
And second, I'm just wondering, does that policy amendment thing that was for April the 12th, does that require a notice of motion, or is it should just come up automatically, right? Okay, then I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. CAO.
No, it's just a notice, but just for clarity, Kelly, is that an annual, like a change to an annual contribution of $1,000 that you're referencing, or a one-time contribution of $1,000? I assume it's annually because that's what they were talking about, but.
Well, I just rounded it up to $1,000, so yeah, I'm sure it'll
Okay.
change next year anyway.
I just wanted to make sure it was consistent with the request as opposed to like a one-time thing. So thank
Yeah,
you.
they can use the $48 for donuts.
Okay. Anything else under new business? Okay, that is the end of our regular agenda. There is an in-camera session to follow. Clerk, do we have anyone still watching us?
We do have some people still watching us, Your Worship, but there are no questions in the chat.
Okay, well, thank you to those people who have stuck it out to stay with us until 10:15. We'll entertain a motion to go in camera. Thank you, Councillor Burdick, seconded by the